popular demand, I am here to record the final chapters of A Night Divided. I've finally given in to the pressure. Seems you guys just can't wait any longer. And how can I say no to fifth graders who want to find out what happens at the end of a novel? I simply can't. So it's almost 1 year after I recorded the original chunk of the chapters of A Night Divided, and we're here almost 1 year later. I look a little different, shorter hair, a whole pandemic has happened, but A Night Divided is still just as amazing of a book. So I'm going to try to do all 3 chapters in this one video. I might not be able to do that. I might have to do 47 in its own video. Let's just see how it goes, okay? Okay, chapter 45. Once they had determined that Fritz wasn't here, the other officers said they would conduct a search of every apartment in this building in case Fritz had gone into one of the others to hide. Victor was ordered to wait here with us. Mama released my hand and casually went into the kitchen to prepare some tea. Why would she care about that with everything else happening? I couldn't even think straight, and she wanted a cup of tea? But my mother surprised me again, because when the tea was ready, she offered it to Victor. Thank you, Frau Lowe, but no, he said. Mama insisted. You must be thirsty from such a long evening, and it's my family's fault that you've been so inconvenienced. It's only some tea. I'd known for a long time that when my mother wanted her way, it was impossible to refuse her. Now Victor understood that too. After she held out the tea long enough, he slung his rifle over his shoulder, then took the teacup. As if this had suddenly become a social visit, Mama sat down on our couch and patted the cushion for me. She gestured for Victor to sit as well, but he would not. It didn't seem to matter to her. I remember when you were no taller than my knee, Mama said to him. You and Fritz were in nursery school together, and so long ago, and must have remained friends since, I believe. We were friends as children, yes, Victor said stiffly. But look at you now, so strong, so grown up. You're young to have so much responsibility. I'm just a junior officer, Victor said, but perhaps in time I will earn my way up. I'm sure you will. Mama stood again, but part of becoming a man is knowing what's important in life. Would you agree? Victor stiffened his spine. I know what's important. Your son would do well to learn the same things. Absolutely. Things like family are what matters most. You have a family too, Victor. You have a mother. If you were in trouble, how far would your mother go to help you? Victor faced forward without answering, but I knew he was listening. Mama took my hand and brought me to my feet. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the key from the Trabant from Oma Gertrude, then left them on the kitchen table. He eyed the keys and looked away again, but he understood what was happening as well as I did. Trabant cars weren't grand in any way, but even the most run-down car often took months to find. A new Trabant might take a decade or more, if someone as young as Victor could even afford one. Victor and my mother were locked in a stare, and I wondered if they were coming to a sort of unspoken agreement. I didn't know. I couldn't tell. I had trouble looking at anything but the gun over his shoulder and thinking about anything other than the way he dumped Herr Kraus on the sidewalk not so many days ago. Victor belonged to the state. His friendship with Fritz meant nothing to him, and we mattered even less. Though he continued staring at Mama, his hand slid to the stock of his gun. He didn't need to shoot. All he had to do was call in the other officers, and they would do it for him. Finally, Mama raised all 10 of her fingers and nodded at him, but he didn't respond. Then she started backing us toward the door, one small step at a time. How far would he let us go before he grabbed the trigger? Or were the 10 fingers part of their silent agreement? I squeezed Mama's hand like I'd never held on to anything before. What if she was wrong? Finally, Victor stole a glance at the Trabant keys, and then I knew we had him. Bribery was a form of currency in the GDR, and when we finally had something valuable enough to offer. So, Mama is offering their car to Victor in order to bribe him. They know that they've been caught. They know he knows. So they're saying, here, take this car and don't tell anyone. He looked forward again and said, I hear a sound in the back room. Don't either of you go anywhere while I check it out. He grabbed the keys and then started to walk towards Fritz's room. As soon as he was gone, Mama opened our door. There was a back exit in case of fire, and Mama and I took that way down as silently as the metal stairs would allow. To me, our footsteps sounded like booming echoes, forcing both of us to our tiptoes to dull the noise. I didn't dare ask Mama about her 10 fingers, not even in a whisper. If it was a signal for time, was that 10 minutes, or did we only have 10 seconds? I didn't know, and only hurried faster. Once we reached the main floor, we inched the back door open, leading us into a dark alley so quiet that it sent shivers up my spine. I expected someone to be waiting here, Mama whispered, which made me wonder what her plan had been if there was. We were out of money, had given up the only valuable thing we still owned, and carried nothing with us but the clothes on our backs. I only answered, there aren't enough officers for every exit. This is God's hand at work helping us, Mama said, clutching my hand to leave. Say a prayer of thanks as we walk. I intended to obey her, but only after we were safe, and that wasn't yet. We were barely out of the alley when whistles blew from inside our building. Our absence had been discovered. This time, I took the lead. Over the past few weeks, to avoid Frau Eberhardt and any other curious eyes, I had found every possible back route to the Welcome Building. I knew where to go now. We heard Grenzer sirens on the main road searching for us, but we didn't need the main roads to get there. At least, not until our last dash into the alley. The problem was that curfew had already begun. Nobody should have been on the streets. So if the officer saw anyone at all, it would be us. We went as carefully as spies, through dark back alleys, Sorry about that. Let's rewind. We went as carefully as spies, through dark back alleys, walkways too narrow to be used as roads, and even through unlocked doors of other people's apartment buildings. The final crossing into the alley was our most difficult, with a long run from one hiding place to another. I wanted to split up, so that if I didn't make it, perhaps my mother would have a chance. But she only grabbed my hand and pushed me into the street as she hurried along at my side. I saw a woman in the window of an apartment overhead, reading a book. When we were in the center of the street, she looked down right at us. I froze for a fraction of a moment, wondering what she might do, but she only pulled the shade for her window and then switched off the light. I thought of the proverb, to see no evil, and hoped it would follow with the woman also refusing to speak any evil. Before I knew it, we were inside the alley. From there, we ran until my garden came into view just ahead. How beautiful it seemed to me then, how deadly. The irrigation ditch that bordered the garden patch would get in our way, slowing us, but I hoped it wouldn't have much water this late at night. You have to jump the ditch, I explained to Mama, and we collected a stack of rocks to the right of it, so just follow me exactly where I go. Her hand pressed against my back. Whatever happens, you keep running, Goethe. Keep running and don't look back for me. Then she pushed me forward. There was nothing more to say. We ran. By now, I knew the land so well I could have run it with my eyes closed, and on this dark night, I might as well have done just that. The ditch was narrowest to my left, and I took that way. I jumped it easily, but Mama missed the bank and splashed in with one foot that became lodged in the mud. No matter what she had said, nothing would make me leave her behind. So I came back and grabbed her hand to help her back onto hard ground. We continued running, and suddenly, lights blazed on in the watchtower ahead of us. Mama and I dropped to the earth like falling timbers. Even without being aimed our way, the lights still brightened the garden considerably, casting everything in long shadows. They swooped up and down the death strip in their usual path and then began to turn our way. I knew this routine. I'd seen it before. Along with other areas east of the wall, the lights would survey this garden patch next. We'd be spotted and our position called out to the Grenzers, still searching for us on the streets. We had less than a minute to get all the way to the building. We ran, so fast that my lungs ached and my head pounded. Rocks had gathered in my shoes, but I barely felt them. We dove against the bricks while the watchtower lights swept down onto our field. It stayed there for a long time, highlighting the shovel I had placed in the dirt earlier that day. That shovel was our monument to freedom, even if nobody else knew it. Remember, that was their secret signal. We weren't there to see where the light went after that, for we had already climbed inside the welcome building and shut the boards tight behind us. Mama leaned against the wall to catch her breath, but I whispered, "No, Mama, please, we're not there yet." She nodded at me and followed. Fritz was waiting for us down in the shelter and looked so relieved that I thought he might almost deflate right in front of us. "What took so long?" he asked. Mama's response was simple. "We had some trouble." He looked at us with red faces and sweat along our foreheads. "Are you both all right?" I only beamed back at him. "We are if that tunnel is open." "It isn't yet," he said. "Papa wanted to give the bricks as long as possible to dry, and so we haven't removed the final load of dirt yet. He figured once we did, even with our fortifications, it's only a matter of time before it collapses." "Then let's get in and remove it," Mama said. "Officer Muller?" I asked. "He's already in the tunnel with his wife and baby. He said when his wife heard about the plan, she insisted they go. They got here an hour ago." We followed Fritz inside. A woman I assumed must be Frau Muller was seated on the ground with a young baby in her arms, who at least so far was asleep. She smiled up at me, and I thought she was a rather pretty woman. Officer Muller stood over them, in full uniform and armed. He greeted me with a solemn nod that seemed more respectful than in our first meeting. I nodded back, but said nothing. It bothered me that he had his gun, because we certainly weren't safe yet, and I remembered his promise if we were caught. Still, when he saw that we had come, he walked over to Fritz and whispered, "We waited for them, as you asked." "The tunnels must be connected immediately," Mama said. "It won't take the Grenzers long to figure out where Goethe and I have gone." "Katharina!" We finally learned Mama's name. My father's relieved voice called from the other side. "You finally come?" "We're here," she said, "though I wouldn't have made it without Goethe's help." "I expected nothing less from my daughter," Papa said. "Let's open the tunnel, but dig carefully. I don't like the cracks I'm seeing on this side." "I bought you some time," Officer Muller said. "My last call into the Central Command tonight was to tell them that I checked this area out and nobody was here. But it won't work for long. When they can't find you on the streets, the senior officers will bring out their dogs who will follow your trail in here." "If only we had some rain," Mama said. "That would erase our trail and mask any noise of us clearing this barrier. Or it could make the ground wet. So wet that we flood," Fritz reminded her. "Enough talk," I said. "Let's dig." Muller and Fritz went to work at our end, and from the other side I heard Papa and Dominic chiseling away at their dirt and rock. We decided to dig low, to maintain as much dirt over our heads as possible. We would have to crouch down to pass through this space, or even crawl, but if necessary, I would have squeezed through the eye of a needle. All I wanted was to be on the other side of this wall. The rabbit-sized hole widened. I could see Papa's boots from here, the same sturdy boots he had worn the night he left, only now with a hole in one side. With another chip, I saw the cuff of his pants, and I begged them to go faster. It was torture to have my father revealed to me, 1 centimeter at a time. The dirt was beginning to pile up around Fritz and Muller, so I offered to go back to the shelter for the bucket and remove what I could. I planned to empty all the spare dirt into a large pile at the entrance to slow the Grenzers if they came. But I was only halfway there before I heard noises above us, in the basement of the welcome building. It wasn't voices, or at least none I could detect from here, but there were footsteps, several of them. I ran back into the tunnel. "Someone's here," I hissed. "We must go now." The gap had opened enough that I could fit through, and maybe Frau Muller. but none of the rest could. And there was a jagged rock jutting out from the center that would probably keep us from getting all the way through. They had been working to gently pry it free. There was no time left to be gentle. It had to be now. I'd rather have had the tunnel collapse than be arrested or shot. Officer Muller withdrew his gun and ran back down the tunnel. I wasn't sure what to do. Did he plan on shooting whoever had come, or shooting us? Then he said, "I'll hold off whoever's there as long as I can." He looked over to Fritz. "Get my wife and baby out first. You owe me that." If Muller intended to protect us, he needed help. With everyone else busy, I grabbed a couple of rocks from the tunnel floor. If someone got past Muller, I could throw hard enough to slow him down until the others escaped. Muller shouted out a warning that he was armed and for whoever was approaching to stop. Then a voice called, "Where's Goethe? Is she here?" It was Anna. I dropped the rocks and ran past Muller to the mouth of the tunnel. "Lower your gun," I hissed at him. "Don't shoot." Anna was waiting in the shelter with her mother while her father finished climbing down the ladder. Seeing my curiosity, she only shrugged and said, "You asked me to figure out why Peter wanted to leave. Well, we did." My mother appeared right behind me. "And we're glad to have your family here." Anna's father nodded at us in return, but said, "Then let's go now. I'm afraid we were noticed being out after curfew. May have put some officers on our trail. They're not far behind us." Flashlights were already showing in the garden patch. It wouldn't take the Grenzers long to follow us inside. They were coming. So I'm actually going to stop there because that chapter was a little longer than I expected. So the next video will be chapters 46 and 47, and you'll get to see how that story ends.